September 7, 1822. The rallying cry on the banks of the Ipiranga reverberated throughout history. Yet, what standard school curricula often omit is that Brazil's genuine independence was hard-won through bloodshed, ordnance, and military strategies that verged on the impossible. While Dom Pedro I was proclaiming our separation from Portugal, Portuguese forces maintained control over entire cities. The northeast region was under siege. Salvador stood as an enemy stronghold, and Brazil itself, it was merely the promise of a nation. In the coming minutes, you will discover how forgotten wars shaped the country we know today. Prepare to learn about epic battles, devastating betrayals, and military secrets that altered the destiny of millions. Block 1. The War of Independence. The Declaration of Independence proved to be merely the prologue to a bloody conflict, largely unknown to the general public. The Siege of Bahia, while the South celebrated, the Northeast was hemorrhaging. Salvador was held by 12,000 Portuguese soldiers. This was not simply a military occupation, it was a seemingly impenetrable fortress. On the opposing side, an unlikely army was forming, farmers taking up arms for the first time, militiamen, lacking formal training, and a fact that would have shocked the society of the time, the formerly enslaved, fighting for the freedom of a nation that still held them in bondage. The Battle of Pirajá, the ruse that changed everything. November 1822. Brazilian troops faced a critical impediment. They were vastly outnumbered. This situation gave rise to one of the most ingenious strategies in Brazilian military history. The commander issued orders for the drums to be beaten incessantly, thereby creating the sonic illusion of a massive army. Unable to see through the dense vegetation, and hearing the thunderous reverberation of the drums from every direction, the Portuguese forces were convinced they were surrounded by superior numbers. The psychological strategy proved effective. The enemy retreated, Brazil's morale soared, and for the first time it became apparent. This war would be won as much through cunning as through courage. The siege that defined a nation, however, the true turning point, arrived with the extended siege of Salvador. For months, Brazilian forces severed all incoming supply lines to the city. Nothing entered, nothing departed. Imagine a capital city under prolonged blockade, devoid of food, reinforcements, or hope. Portuguese soldiers watched their comrades perish, not only in combat but also from starvation and disease. In July 1823, broken by famine and isolation, the Portuguese forces embarked for Lisbon. Salvador was liberated, and for the first time, independence was not merely a document, it was a reality forged, inch by painful inch. The unacknowledged heroes. But here is the untold truth. This war was ultimately won by ordinary people who never received the recognition they deserved. Women cooked, tended to wounded, and even took up arms when circumstances demanded it. Indigenous peoples, whose intimate knowledge of the terrain was unparalleled, served as crucial guides. Children darted between enemy lines, delivering clandestine messages. And the formerly enslaved, many fought under the promise of liberty, a pledge that, for countless individuals, would ultimately remain unfulfilled. Brazilian independence was achieved, yes, but at what cost? And for whose benefit? Block 2. The Lost Province, the Cisplatine War. Few Brazilians realize, but our country was once larger, substantially larger. The territory Brazil ceded the early 19th century. Brazil exerted control over a vast southern region, known as the Cisplatine Province. Today, that territory bears a different name, Uruguay. In 1825, local revolutionaries, backed by Argentina, declared, "We will no longer be part of the Brazilian Empire." Thus began a conflict that fundamentally reshaped the map of South America. Three forces, one territory. On one side, Brazil, striving desperately to retain its territory. On the other, the Uruguayans, battling for their distinct identity. And in the middle, Argentina, recognizing a golden opportunity to debilitate its primary regional rival. The stage transformed into a battlefield. Devastating ground engagements, naval battles that stained the waters of the Rio de la Plata crimson. Victory in battle, defeat in war. In 1827, the Battle of Passo do Rosario took place. The Brazilian army achieved an overwhelming victory. It appeared to herald the beginning of the end for the rebellion. But a fundamental problem persisted. The Brazilian populace was weary of watching their sons perish, weary of paying taxes to finance a faraway conflict, wary of asking, why are we doing this? Even while prevailing in battles, Brazil was losing the war for public opinion. The unlikely diplomat. This is when Great Britain intervened, not with soldiers, but through diplomacy. The British possessed significant commercial interests in the region and urgently required stability. They offered to mediate the conflict, and in 1828, the Treaty of Montevideo was signed. The Cisplatine province gained its independence. Uruguay was officially born. For Brazil, it constituted a painful territorial loss, yet it also brought political relief. The costly and widely unpopular war had finally concluded. The forgotten lesson, this war imparted a crucial insight. Victory is not always achieved through sheer force of arms. Sometimes, diplomacy speaks louder than cannon fire. And what of Uruguay? It was established as a buffer state between Brazil and Argentina, effectively stabilizing the regional balance of power for decades. This constituted the newly independent Brazil's first major lesson in geopolitics. Block 3. The Republican Rebellion, the Confederation of the Equator, by 1824. Merely 2 years following independence, Brazil was already confronting its first major internal crisis. The emperor who betrayed his promise, expectations were high that Dom Pedro I would draft a democratic constitution, thereby granting a voice to the provinces. Instead, he dissolved the Constituent Assembly and unilaterally imposed an authoritarian charter that consolidated all authority in his own hands. The message was unequivocal: I command, you comply. The Northeastern Revolt. The Northeast, particularly Pernambuco, refused to acquiesce. The region possessed a history of struggling for autonomy and was unwilling to exchange the Portuguese yoke for imperial authoritarianism. Inspired by the republican ideals sweeping across Latin America, Pernambucan leaders proposed a revolutionary action, establishing a federative republic in northern Brazil. Ceará adhered, Paraguay adhered, Rio Grande do Norte adhered. Abruptly, half of the Northeast was in open insurrection against the emperor. What were their demands? Freedom of the press, an end to authoritarianism, provincial autonomy, a substantive voice in governance. These demands, which today appear rudimentary, were in 1824 deemed both revolutionary and perilous. The empire's brutal response: Dom Pedro I neither negotiated nor heeded their pleas, nor did he concede ground. He dispatched imperial troops led by Francisco Lima e Silva with an unambiguous mandate to crush the rebellion, mercilessly. The fighting was intense but swift. The leaders were apprehended one by one. Frei Caneca, the martyr. The most prominent of the leaders was Frei Caneca, a clergyman who envisioned a more equitable Brazil. When he was condemned to death, something extraordinary transpired. The executioners themselves refused to carry out the sentence. They could not reconcile themselves to executing a man of faith. The empire's solution: to execute him by firing squad. Frei Caneca perished, yet he became a symbol of resistance, a symbol that not everyone would silently acquiesce to authoritarian rule. What remains? The Confederation of the Equator was successfully quelled within a few months. Nevertheless, it left an indelible mark. It stood as the first major clarion call for liberty and decentralization following independence. And it posed a question that still resonates. Liberty for whom? Independence to accomplish what? Block 4. The Gaucho Republic, the Ragamuffin Revolution. Envision this. For 10 full years, a region of Brazil operated as an independent nation, complete with its own flag, its own army, its own constitution. Does it sound like fiction? It is genuine history. The South, that wished to secede in 1835, Rio Grande do Sul. The Gaucho ranchers *estancieros* were incensed. The motive? Exorbitant taxes levied on *char, q*, dried, salted meat that was vital to the local economy. Concurrently, producers in the north were beneficiaries of imperial government subsidies. The Gauchos felt exploited, forsaken, and demeaned, and they resolved: if the empire does not value us, we shall not recognize the empire. A republic is born. Under the leadership of Bento Gonçalves, the rebels, pejoratively dubbed Ragamuffins *Farroupilha seized significant cities and proclaimed the Rio Grandense Republic. This was not merely symbolic. They established their own tricolor flag, an organized military force, laws, and a foundational constitution, an autonomous taxation system. In 1839, they expanded their reach further, establishing the Julian Republic in Santa Catarina. For years, these republics functioned as genuine, sovereign states within Brazilian territory. The Black Lancers, the betrayal, however, there is a painful chapter in this history that must be recounted. Numerous enslaved individuals fought alongside the Ragamuffins. The promise: emancipation following victory. They formed a specialized battalion, the Black Lancers, valiant warriors who fought in the most brutal engagements, consistently on the front line. Yet, when the conflict concluded, they were betrayed. The promised freedom denied to the majority. Some were even repatriated to their former masters. It serves as a bitter reminder: not all struggles for liberty encompassed all Brazilians. The cessation of hostilities for years. The empire attempted military subjugation and repeatedly failed. The Gauchos were intimately familiar with the terrain, possessed potent motivation, and benefited from competent leadership. Consequently, the empire shifted its strategy to diplomacy. In 1845, the Treaty of Ponte Verde was signed. The Ragamuffins received full and unconditional amnesty. They retained their military ranks. They had certain economic demands satisfied in exchange. They consented to be reintegrated into Brazil. The enduring legacy, the Ragamuffin Revolution, demonstrated that Brazilian unity was not achieved peaceably. It was negotiated, brokered, and frequently imposed through coercion. But it also revealed something further. There were Brazilians prepared to fight for a decade for their singular vision of the nation. This is something that cannot be overlooked. Block 5. The Paraguayan War. the conflict that reshaped everything. This remains the most devastating war South America has ever witnessed, and it irrevocably altered Brazil. The onset of the nightmare. December 1864. The Paraguayan dictator Solano Lopez was incensed. Brazil had invaded Uruguay, an act he perceived as a mortal threat to the regional equilibrium. His retort? He seized a Brazilian vessel. He launched an invasion of Mato Grosso. He then attempted a march through Argentina to strike at southern Brazil. This served as the catalyst for the formation of the Triple Alliance. Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay coalesced against Paraguay. 6 years of unrelenting hell. What was intended to be a swift campaign devolved into a 6-year war of attrition. The ensuing battles were unsparingly brutal. Curupati, a massacre where thousands perished in a matter of hours. Homita, a fortress that proved seemingly impregnable. AV fierce hand-to-hand combat that left the field strewn with casualties. The Brazilian army contended with unimaginable challenges. Precarious logistics across flooded territories. Tropical diseases claiming more lives than enemy ordnance. A deeply entrenched and resolute enemy forced the unlikely contingent. Who comprised the combatants in this war? A surprisingly diverse cohort. Professional soldiers, civilian volunteers, former enslaved individuals granted manumission in exchange for service. Men from every social stratum. For the first time in Brazilian history, the affluent and the impoverished, white and black, fought shoulder to shoulder. The army became, ironically, one of the empire's most egalitarian institutions. Solano Lopez, the man who refused to yield. Lopez, rebuffed every single peace accord. Everyone, even when his capital was besieged, even when his army lay decimated, even when all was manifestly lost. He chose to fight literally to the death. In 1870, he was killed in action, finally bringing the protracted conflict to a close. The human toll, the figures are harrowing. Paraguay lost between 60% and 70% of its total population. Nearly the entire adult male populace was annihilated. Brazil, over 100,000 fatalities. Entire families were bereaved of their sons. Paraguayan cities were rendered utterly desolate. The nation's economy collapsed. Recovery would require generations. What did Brazil gain? Militarily, Brazil was consolidated as the regional hegemonic power. It demonstrated a formidable capacity for mobilization and resilience. But at a staggering cost, external debt ballooned. Thousands of families were shattered. The empire began to show fissures. And something unexpected transpired. The formerly enslaved individuals who had fought returned, posing the question, we fought for the nation, where is our freedom? The Paraguayan War accelerated the abolition debate. Black soldiers, having proven their valor, were no longer willing to return to bondage. The most profound legacy. This war fundamentally reshaped Brazil in ways no one anticipated. It solidified the army as a fundamental institution. It forged a generation of veterans critical of the empire. It galvanized the abolitionist movement. It exposed the inherent limitations of the imperial model. Decades later, it would be precisely the military veterans of this conflict who would help overthrow the monarchy. The Paraguayan War did not merely redraw the map. It altered the very soul of Brazil. Block 6. The Wars of the 20th and 21st Centuries. 20th century Brazil confronted different types of conflicts, less territorial in nature, more ideological. World War I. The awakening. In 1917, German U-boats sank Brazilian merchant vessels. Brazilian civilians perished in the Atlantic. The response? Brazil declared war on Germany. Our involvement did not entail millions of soldiers in European trenches. Yet it was significant. We patrolled the South Atlantic. We safeguarded vital commercial routes. We modernized our navy. Crucially, Brazil shed its isolation and began to engage with the global arena. World War II, the Feb in Italy. In 1942, Brazilian vessels were torpedoed. Hundreds of civilians were killed. Getulio Vargas declared war on the Axis powers and established a historical entity, the Brazilian Expeditionary Force, FEB. 25,000 Brazilian soldiers fought in Italy. Monte Castello, a mountain seized after numerous attempts. Montese, liberation of an Italian town. Fornovo, capture of an entire German division. The Brazilian Pracenas soldiers impressed the Allies. They fought through the European cold. They faced seasoned Nazi troops, and they prevailed. They returned home as heroes, and Brazil garnered international respect. Peace missions. Brazil as a peacemaker. Following the World Wars, Brazil opted for a different path, becoming a harbinger of peace. Suez Canal, 1956 to 1967, monitoring the ceasefire between Israel and Egypt. Mozambique, 1990s, oversight of a peace accord following civil war. Angola, verification of peace processes. Haiti, 2004 to 2017. The most critical mission. Brazil led the UN peacekeeping force. It assisted in rebuilding a devastated country. It trained police forces. It reconstituted institutions. It served as irrefutable evidence that Brazil could assert itself as an international leading force without resorting to armed conflict. From the hallowed banks of the Ipiranga to the rugged mountains of Italy, from the sweeping pampas to the thoroughfares of Haiti, the Brazil you recognize today was not born of tranquility. It was tempered in obscure battles, in conflicts that historical texts omit. In unrecalled sacrifices, thousands of unheralded Brazilians strove, bled, and perished for a singular vision, the very concept of nationhood. Their motivations were not invariably righteous. The conflicts themselves were not perpetually equitable, and the heroes seldom received the recognition they deserved. Yet, every single skirmish, every engagement, every sacrifice was instrumental in shaping the nation we are today. The next time you gaze upon our national ensign, remember this: concealed behind the green and gold are narratives of valor, perfidy, strategic acumen, and sheer survival. These are accounts that warrant narration. These are histories we must not consign to oblivion. And what of you? Were you aware of these conflicts that fundamentally shaped Brazil? If this video has served as an epiphany, illuminating a historical account omitted from your formal schooling, please ensure you hit the like button, share this content widely, and subscribe to the channel. The unvarnished history of Brazil, after all, is still in the process of being uncovered.